Welcome to Blade Pride Chats. I'm Kevin Naff, the editor of The Blade. Thanks for joining us. We have been doing these chats all month long to celebrate Pride, and we're wrapping it up with my favorite. Please welcome Dame Brian Moylan.
Hello, Kevin Naff. How are you?
I'm well. It's good to see you. It's been way too long.
Oh my God, it's been a million years. I'm so happy to be back with you and on the other side of the blade for the first time ever.
I know. So let me do a quickie intro, and then we're going to just jump right into all of the tea, and there's a lot of it. Brian Moylan is the author of The Real Story Behind the Real Housewives. I have my copy right here. And
sign it for you through the screen.
I know. Who did the cover, by the way? It's really cool artwork.
Flatiron Books. I wish I could take credit for it because it looks amazing. So thank you, Flatiron designer.
Yeah, they did a great job with it. You also are the author of Pretty Mess, which is the biography of Erika Jayne. More on her later, because mess is the appropriate word. Brian also writes the famous Housewives recaps for Vulture. And most importantly, Brian is a former reporter and editor at the Washington Blade.
Yes, I even thanked some of the Washington Blade and some of the staff members in the book for teaching me how to be a real reporter.
Including me. Thank you.
Including you. You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for the
People always ask me if I went to journalism school, and I said no. It was just patient lesbians at the Washington Blade, taught me everything I know about being a reporter. So thank you, patient lesbians.
The best teachers.
Yes.
So I love the book, and not just the acknowledgments page, but I think that. Well, it's breezy, dishy, fun, but it's also a really cool commentary on pop culture history. So even if you're not like a Housewives junkie, I think there's a lot in the book that people will find interesting, just about sort of the evolution of pop culture and television. And I was thinking maybe if we could just kind of start there about that evolution. You talk about it a lot in the book, about how soap operas, became popular, and then as more women entered the workforce, they became less popular, and sort of how that all led to where we are now. If you could maybe just recap a little, give us a little history lesson.
Yeah, well, and basically it's, and I think that a lot of the stuff that reality television has inherited about being for women and kind of degraded and thought less of, and it's a guilty pleasure, really inherited from its forebear, the soap opera, which, it was the first place that was doing serialized storytelling before, Hill Street Blues and every, Mad Men and all those shows came along. It was the only place you could find that was on soap operas, and it was really telling stories about women and about the domestic sphere and about relationships. And that was the first place we really saw that. And, it had several waves. It started on the radio and then was popular with Housewives. And then in the 70s and 80s was a lot more popular with college kids. And then, it's kind of dying out today. But as reality started happening with The Real World, starting in the early 90s, Mary-Elise Bunham, who started The Real World, was a former soap opera writer, and she started it with Jonathan Murray, who was a documentarian. So we really see sort of documentary and soap opera fusing into what eventually becomes reality television. And I think that The Housewives has become the best illustration of that. And you see storytelling techniques, camera techniques, even former soap opera actresses are now showing up on The Real Housewives. And so it really owes everything to that kind of television history.
That's interesting. And you also talk in the book about how the Housewives are sort of looked at as the creme de la creme of reality TV, and that other shows, they want production staff who have had experience on the Housewives.
Yes. Yeah. And any Bravo show, and that's what the people who I talk to who have worked on Bravo shows, almost all of which are freelancers, that they say when they're looking for other jobs, they say, oh, they want previous Bravo experience, because Bravo is thought to be like the best and the highest quality. But you see it in, the Kardashians debuted as the same year as the Housewives, but you'll see a lot of the Housewives changing the Kardashians. You see it in Mob Wives, the Housewives begat Mob Wives and Love and Hip Hop and, Jersey Shore, even all these other kind of docu-soaps are borrowing things that the Real Housewives started and then sort of perfected.
Well, let's talk about how the Housewives themselves got started, because everybody kind of, I think, assumes that Andy Cohen like created it out of thin air and he, it's his thing, but he really had nothing to do with the creation of the first one, the OC. Just talk about that, like who actually created it. And you said in the book that I think that Andy didn't even like the name of the show. Like he didn't even want to call it The Real Housewives.
Well, he didn't want to call it The Real Housewives of Orange County. He just wanted to call it The Real Housewives. And then Lauren Zlasnik, who was then the head of Bravo, added of Orange County, which is what made it into a franchise, which I think is what made it so successful. But it was created by this guy named Scott Dunlop, who was this sort of like dilettante who lived in Orange County, and he worked in advertising in a bunch of different industries. And he was at a dinner party in the OC and was like, oh, we should start a show, but and it's about our lives, but it's starring us. And his concept was more of a Curb Your Enthusiasm kind of platform, where it would be people playing versions of themselves and sort of set up situations. And so the one he used as an illustration when talking about it early on is son comes home from college to live in Orange County and thinks he's going to live the rich life he's been accustomed to in Orange County. And then his father's like, no, you got to get a job. And he doesn't want to get a job. And, improv ensues. And he got on board with he was, working on this concept. And then he had a friend who was a reality producer who made several shows for Bravo, like the 100 Scariest Horror Films or whatever. And they started The Real Housewives as we know it and sold it to Bravo. And you'll see in the first seasons of Real Housewives of Orange County, now if you watch it back, you see some of the exact scenarios that Scott Dunlop was talking about. Like in the first episode, Lori Peterson, who works for Vicki Gunvalson, her daughter comes home from LA and wants to live in the house. And Lori's like, you can have this pull-out sofa if you want, and you have to get a job and you can't just pay your bills. And so you see that much more structured, we would call it structured reality, like produced scenarios in that first season. But Bravo was really unhappy with the way he handled it, and so fired him after the first season and hired this company called Evolution Media, which created the show Boy Meets Boy for Bravo, which I reviewed for the Washington Blade 17 million years ago. And even back then was like, girl, this is messed up, because it was a reality show where a gay guy was in a house, and he was like the Bachelor, and he was picking amongst all these other single gentlemen. But what they didn't tell him until the very end of the show is that half of the guys were straight. And if he picked a gay guy, then he won a prize, or they won like, yeah, like they won a vacation together. And if he picked a straight guy, the straight guy won a bunch of money and he got like nothing. And yeah, and so the gay guy who made that went on to make Real Housewives of Orange County, and his company has been making it ever since. And they make Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, they make Vanderpump Rules, they make Botched. So yeah, it all started with Boy Meets Boy.
Gosh, who knew?
Yeah.
You what was the term you used? Structured
reality. So that's what they would call a show like The Hills, where it's like, okay, guys, sit down, and you're mad at her because of this, and you're mad at her because of this, and like go at it. Whereas The Housewives is a lot less structured in that way, where they say, okay, you're going to have lunch and you need to talk about the party last night, but whatever you say is up to you, and everything else, it's, up to you to decide. So it's less structured than I think a lot of people think it is. It's not like really scripted like some other shows. Like if you look at something like Selling Sunset is very clearly like maneuvered in a direction that The Housewives isn't necessarily.
So I get that it's not literally scripted, like the words they're saying are not written down for them, but the scenes are often come across as pretty contrived, right? I mean, they tell them, like you're going on this vacation, and they wouldn't otherwise be on vacation together.
No, yes. And I think that they're putting them in situations that are produced, that the producers put together. It's like, you're going to meet at this restaurant at this time, and there's going to be cameras and lights and everything set up. But then when they get there, they say, okay, you have to talk about why you're fighting, but they don't ever tell the women what to say or how to feel, and things can change. And so they send them on these vacations, and they make them do activities and things like that are, pre-structured, but how the women react to them, the fights they may get in, the makeups they might do, that's kind of all up to them. So I think and you see a lot of times things that one can't control, like Jen Shaw getting arrested in the middle of production, or Erica Jane and her divorce and that unfolding, or the Countess Luann getting arrested. So,
or didn't Vicky's mother die while she was on camera?
Yes, like Vicky got the call that her mother died while she was on camera. And so
yeah, that's terrible.
So you can't plan those things. And so I think that the Housewives is a lot less contrived than some other reality shows that you see.
Well, I have some original tea that I can provide.
I'm ready.
So, yes. So on this subject. So we did an event at SUR out in LA, which is where they filmed Vanderpump.
Oh, yeah.
And so I had a meeting there at like 3:00 in the afternoon when it was closed. So I went in, and they were filming Vanderpump. And so I just sort of like hid in the background and like secretly took pictures. But first of all, everybody that works there is like super professional and great to work with. I mean, that French manager, the woman, I can't think of her name, but she was so nice and great.
Nadine? Is that her name?
Maybe. I don't remember.
Oh, whatever.
I mean, Lisa was really generous with her time, gives a great impromptu speech. She was really cool. James Kennedy, who comes off as such a jerk on the show, when I walked in, like stood up, made eye contact, shook my hand, couldn't have been nicer. So anyway, I'm lurking in the background, and they were filming a scene where like James is, in the DJ booth, and he's like spinning the ones and twos, and he's like grooving out to music that is not playing, for an audience that is not there. I was the only one in the room. and then Lisa comes like strutting in, and it was supposed to be like, Lisa confronts James at the DJ booth. So she struts over there, and she's all glammed out in high heels and everything. And I don't know, she goes up there and like wags her finger and gives them the what for, and they didn't really like how that went. So then she like comes back and does it again. So again, like the words that they're saying are not written down, but obviously, like, in this scene, Lisa confronts James. So
I think that happens more on Vanderpump than on a lot of the other shows. And I think that's because of Lisa Vanderpump being an executive producer. And I think that is what the women were mad about on Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, that Lisa wanted to control all the scenes and was producing it, and they were like, we don't want you to. And the producers don't particularly care for that either. Like, I heard reports when they filmed that book party for Stassi at Tom Tom, where she gets in a fight with Tom Sandoval, I think it is, and how they like had them redo it over and over again. And so the Housewives don't really do a lot of retakes, but they will do something like if Portia and Kenya make up off stage, they'll, like off camera, they'll be like, okay, we need to set up a phone call with you two, and then you two go over like why you're friends now. So it's not like telling them like, okay, you need to make up and here's how you're going to do it. It's like, oh, I saw this thing that really happened, and now we're going to fill it in for the viewers at home.
Right. Okay, well, that's interesting. And you mentioned the word controlling, so that's a good segue because Bravo is very controlling when it comes to this franchise.
Yes, sir.
They wanted to control this book that you wrote. They wanted to edit the book. So tell that story, because you write about it in the book, but it's interesting. It's interesting to me how controlling they are, because, the old maxim, like there's no such thing as bad publicity. Like, you're writing a book as a fan, so obviously you weren't setting out to do a hit job on them.
Right.
But yet they got involved and they wanted to take it over and edit the thing. So tell us that story.
So I had always had a good working relationship with Bravo, and every housewife, current and past, if they're going to do an interview about the Real Housewives, they have to ask Bravo for permission. And so I knew that once I started talking to housewives, they were going to tell Bravo I was working on this book. So I decided to get ahead of it and say, hey, I'm going to do this book. And I had already sold the proposal and everything. And they were like, okay, let's talk about partnering. So we talked about partnering. They asked for a prospective outline. They asked for an interview list, which I sent them like in good faith. And then they said that, okay, we'll partner up with you. We'll set up the interviews. We'll help promote the book, but we want 10% of the sales and we want complete editorial control over the book and its marketing. And my editor was like, screw you guys, you're crazy. And so then they took my interview list and emailed everybody on it, as well as every housewife ever existed, and said, don't talk to this guy. They called Erica, whose book I wrote and, you know, have a relationship with, several times to tell her not to talk to me for the book, and really went out of their way to just not have anybody talk to me because, you know, and I don't think that there's, you know, I set out to tell the truth and I set out to answer fans' questions and let them know what's up. And I think a lot of times Bravo, like I think Bravo knows that Andy Cohen didn't create it, but when, you know, people say that he did, they don't correct him because they would rather, you know, kind of propagate that myth. And they just want to have control over everything. And since they couldn't control this, they really fought to end it. And somehow they got the idea to do their own book, which is coming out in the fall.
Wow.
Huh. I wonder where they might have gotten that idea.
I'm surprised they only wanted 10%.
I know. Well, also what I think people might not realize is that if a housewife starts a business while on the show and then sells that business for more than $1 million, Bravo gets 10% of that business.
That's the Bethany rule.
That's it, literally, they put that in because of Bethany. And they also put in a clause because of Kelly Dodd, RAP. Well, not RAP, but she just got fired. But because she would harass people on social media. So they put a clause in the contract saying that if you harass your friends, you get, or if you harass your castmates, you could get fined. But yeah, Bravo just really wants control over it. And I think that that's the thing is there's not, I am a fan and I love the show. And I don't think there's that much objectionable in the book, but the fact that they couldn't control it and couldn't manage the narrative really freaked them out, I think. So
yeah, they come off as just really petty and paranoid in the book. I mean, with the lawyers calling you and
yes,
all of that.
Like, I get it, they're doing their job and they're protecting this like $1 billion franchise, but also I think that the way they're doing it is stupid. And you know, it'd be one thing to be like, okay, we're not going to participate, but then to like actively like seek to squash it and come out with their own book and so on and so forth. Yeah, it just seems like crazy. But as I found in researching the book, everything about the Housewives eventually becomes the Housewives. And I think that Bravo really does kind of run like Housewives. So yeah.
And so you have no regrets about not cooperating with them, because if you had gone with them, they would have put you on Watch What Happens Live and promoted it. And
well, they also wanted control of the marketing. So I feel like they might have put Andy Cohen on Watch What Happens Live to talk about this book. And then it's like, oh, this guy, Brian Moylan, wrote it and he's nowhere to be seen. So, but I think it made for a better book because I had to break out all the journalism skills I learned at the Washington Blade. And I was like cold calling people. I was like trolling through LexisNexis. I was, you know, digging up anybody I could find. And, you know, you can find a lot of behind the scenes stuff about the Housewives on BravoTV.com or in other articles about the Housewives, but that is things that Bravo's controlling. And so I think this is people talking, knowing Bravo isn't going to get back at them, knowing Bravo can't control them. And so the people that wanted to talk to me really wanted to dish. So I think that there's a lot of good stuff in here. And, you know, and a lot of these people, especially the producers and editors and story editors, don't get any of the glory and they do so much work on the show. So I think they were just excited to have somebody asking about what they do and how they do it and how that affects this thing that we all love and that the people making it really love in a lot of cases too.
Good point. And there are an impressive number of sources in the book. It is
Thank you.
It's well sourced.
I mean, you taught me well. Thank you, Kevin Knapp.
All right, well, let's talk about the women because that's obviously the focus of the book.
Yeah.
Who's your favorite?
My favorite of all time is Sonia Morgan to watch. I did write Erica's book, and she and I have a, relationship. But aside from her, I don't really have any close ties to the relationships or to the Housewives. So, but I could watch Sonia Morgan for a million years. She just cracks me up. I love her. I also love to watch Robin and Giselle together. Like, their friendship makes me so happy. Those Potomac women right in your backyard are fucking killing it.
I only watched the first season of that one because they filmed a bunch in Rehoboth, but I haven't seen it since then.
You need to revisit. It's very good. And there's a whole, like, everybody thinks that Ashley Darby's husband is gay, and there's this whole, like, gay undercurrent going on there. I mean, I expect a Washington Blade investigation into whether or not Michael Darby is a member of the LGBTQ community.
Well, I think this is right. Wasn't he at the Blue Moon in Rehoboth? They filmed in the Blue Moon, which is a gay bar. And,
they did, yes.
I believe he was there with them.
He came to surprise Ashley when they were all staying at her house near Rehoboth. I think their house is in Lewis, maybe.
Okay, yeah, that's not far. Well, surprise.
Yeah, exactly.
So you mentioned Sonia's your favorite. I can't figure her out. Is she acting crazy and goofy? Is she drunk all the time? Is it a put on, or like what is her deal?
I have met enough Real Housewives to know that they're all exactly like they are on television, and we've seen enough of them try to act over the years that I know that they're not acting, because none of them are that good. But I think that Sonia is just really that crazy and daffy, and I have met her a handful of times around New York City when I lived there at various and sundry events, and she's just like that. Now I think it might be some kind of combination of drinking and medication, because she seems to get more fucked up than she should. And she gets more messed up now than she did in the olden days. And so I think that something has changed.
Okay, I agree with that. And did you notice who she was on the phone with a couple weeks ago?
No, who was she on the phone with?
Oh my God, I knew something that you don't know. It was freaking Bill Kapfer.
No.
Our old boss from Window Media. When she's at the restaurant and she calls her friend, remember?
Yeah.
That was Bill. I had to watch that because I thought, I know that voice. Yeah, that's Bill. I don't know if Bill Kapfer is watching us right now, but he could.
Hi, Bill Kapfer. What happened to her? Where's she now?
Well, New York. And I think it's at JP Morgan running diversity inclusion. And that's why she called him.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, go back and rewatch it. I'm 99.9% sure that's him.
That makes 100, because she was like, my friend William. Oh my God, I did not put that 2 and 2 together.
See?
My favorite was when last season on Real Housewives of New York, Leah went to that Russian spa like a couple times. And I had been to gay sex parties in that Russian spa like back in the day. And I was like, I wrote in my recap, I was like, let me tell you a thing about Spa 99, okay?
Oh my God, that is hilarious.
Yeah. It's always crazy when real life hits in the Real Housewives. I want to know who your favorite is.
Oh, Nene Leakes, 100%.
I can see that for you. How do you feel about how she's been behaving since she left the show?
I don't understand it. I don't get it. Like, it doesn't, like that. I mean, I don't know. But this is one of my questions. We're going to come back to Andy Cohen in a minute, but I don't get it. Because she's given interviews where she said, you know, she's alleged that there's been racist treatment of her by Bravo or whatever. But then she was asked, you know, was your contract canceled? And she said no, that she was offered the same amount of money to film only 6 episodes. To me, that sounds like a great deal.
Well, and she and the Atlanta ladies, because it's the highest rated, make more than almost anybody else. And she and Candy were the 2 making the most money at the time. Right. I think Candy was making slightly more than Nene at like just over $2 million a season. And I think that apparently they've been trying to get the salaries of some of the longer term housewives down. And so I think they might have offered her less money, which apparently is an offer they made to some of her castmates, which they accepted. And she was like, no, I'm not going to do it for less money. But I don't see that as racist at all, because you're, one of two predominantly shows with predominantly Black cast, and you're making more money than everybody else. So, I don't, yeah.
So, I took Nene to the White House Correspondents' Dinner like 5 years ago.
And how was she to hang out with?
Oh my God, exactly like she is on the show.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm not kidding you. There were huge stars there. I mean, Jane Fonda was there. Aretha Franklin was there. No one got a bigger round of applause on the red carpet than Nene did. And
that's what's
huge. I mean, she's super popular. She has a lot of fans. And it was interesting. She called me right before the dinner, and she was really nervous. And she said she'd been at an event the prior night at somewhere in DC, and they didn't have security. And she ended up getting like mobbed by fans and like surrounded, and everybody was like trying to take her picture, and she like freaked out. And so she was calling me to say like, is this event going to have security, proper security? And I said, Nene, the president of the United States is in the room. There will be security. Don't worry.
Yeah.
But she was funny. She was really nervous. And when we got there to the red carpet, normally what happens is the stars, I meet them, and then like they hand me their purse and they walk the red carpet, and then I meet them at the end. But she would not do that. And she said, no, I really want someone to hold on to. And she's really tall. We're like the same height.
Yeah.
So it was great. So she's like, no, you walk the red. So I walked the red carpet with her. And I leaned over at one point and I said, Nene, everybody is wondering, like, who is this white guy with you? And it was, but we had a blast. She didn't even want to like mix and mingle. We went like right to the table and just gossiped, and she kind of dished on everybody that walked by, like all the celebrities that walked by. But we had a great time. She's hilarious. She is my favorite.
That totally makes sense. I have a friend who worked on a pilot with her that ended up not getting picked up, but he said, yeah, she was just like amazing and professional and was trying real hard, and was a really hard worker and all that stuff. So yeah, but like I said, they're all exactly like they are on television.
It seems that way. And what about, you read about Kyle in the book, that she's like a really nice person, and she hangs out with the crews and stuff.
Well, and she's really tight with the producers, especially like the hires up. And she's had like the same producer for a long time on the show. And so I think she's seen as having a lot of control and a lot of power about what happens on Real Houses of Beverly Hills. But everyone I talked to said the nicest, best person to work with is Cynthia from Real Houses of Atlanta, that she is like always on time. She always shows up. She'll like go above and beyond to make sure everything goes right, like that. She is just easy breezy and amazing. And so I was pleased, because I'm a big Cynthia fan too.
Yeah, I like her. That's interesting. Now, who's the worst? Because there's somebody in the book you write about, but I want to see if you say the same person I'm thinking.
It's probably Ramona Singer. But there have been a lot of people who I heard are quite problematic, or who are difficult to work with. And some of them don't stick around long. Like Jill Zarin, I think part of the reason why she hasn't come back is because she's hard to work with. I heard the same thing about Carol Radziwill and Dorinda Medley, sadly, because I'm fans of both of those. So there's a story in the book where Ramona Singer once called Bravo, and the person who answered the phone didn't recognize her voice and asked, who is this? And she's like, oh, I'm Ramona Singer. And then whoever she got on the line was like, you need to fire that person. They didn't know who I was, blah, blah, blah. And so, yeah, I also heard that Lisa Vanderpump is amazing to work with and like totally game for anything. So yeah, I think it's across the spectrum.
Well, I thought you were going to say Aviva Drescher was the worst.
Oh, yeah, Aviva. Well, I think Aviva Drescher is just like a nightmare in general. And funny enough, so I reached out to her to talk for the book. I was like, if anyone is going to talk to me, it's Aviva Drescher.
Yeah.
And so I like emailed her through her website or something. And I was like, hey, I'm doing this book. Would love to talk to you, whatever. And then she was like, sure, I'd love to, when's good for you? And we're like setting up a time. And then she emails me back and it's like, oh, actually, no, I don't think I can do this. And I don't know if she like read all the shit I had written about her or if like she asked Bravo and Bravo told her no, but she changed her mind. And then she was like, but if you ever have any business opportunities, be sure to let me know. And I was like,
Business
girl. Yeah. So, or maybe she was trying to get paid for an interview. I don't know, but I certainly wasn't gonna. Yeah.
Wow. All right. Well, of course, now we need to talk about Erica Jane. So I'm caught up. I watched this week's episode where it finally comes out that, she's left her husband. And
yes.
I mean, I guess I don't know what my question is other than, well, I guess, first of all, since you do know her and are you still in touch with her? Do you talk to her? And what can you say? Like, do you believe that she knew nothing about all this financial shenanigans?
I do believe that she knew nothing about these financial shenanigans, mostly because, my husband, he makes more money than me, first of all, like Erica Jane's husband, but, he tells me where the money's coming from and I'm like, okay. And like, just use the charge plate and, it goes through and I don't ask any questions. So, I assume that Erica might have been in a similar situation where, and it seems like reading all the articles that even some of the people at his law firm didn't know what he was doing. So I don't think that she knew about that. And I am still in touch with her. We chat on social media. We text every once in a while. I sometimes see her when I'm in LA. But we're not like besties or anything. But yeah, I think that I talked to her a couple months ago before the show started, and I think she's just still trying to figure it out. And she says she was totally taken by surprise. She had no idea what was going on, and she's still, the end isn't really in sight because there's still all these lawsuits. They're coming after her money. They're trying to figure it out in the courts, and I don't think she knows exactly where it's going to land yet. So I think she's a little unmoored at the
I would be
moment.
more too if I were her, because the allegations are really serious, and
yeah,
I mean, it's a lot of money, and the plaintiffs they've said are watching the show because if she comes strolling out in a $10,000 jacket, they want the jacket, the shoes, and the earrings.
Yes, and I think that she's going to be on the hook for a lot of that. And yeah, I don't, obviously what Tom was doing was awful, and I don't condone that at all. But I think that a lot of fans are rushing to judge just based on, and I saw this in the comments of my recap today. I know the first rule of the internet is never read the comments, but I did anyway. Mm-hmm. And they were like, oh, Brian's totally wrong about this. Like, I know she knew, and I know this. And it's like, none of us know. Like, we also haven't heard the whole story yet. We haven't seen it play out. We don't know what's going to happen. So I'm just, right. Well, if we find out that she did know and she was helping Tom do the shit, obviously that's bad, and I'm not going to defend her. But, I think we should give her a little bit of time.
I mean, it certainly is perfectly possible and plausible even that she didn't know. But that will not shield her from what's coming in terms of, these plaintiffs trying to recoup that money. So if I were her, I would not have shot this season because they're going to be taking notes on everything she wears, everything she buys. I think she should have bowed out, but
I don't disagree with you because it's like everything you put on the record is evidence, and right. Being on the show is putting things on the record. But I also think that she wanted to be able, and this is just conjecture, that she might have wanted the chance to be able to tell her own story, because I think that we are seeing the press play it out in one way. And I think a lot of the early articles about it, there was a lot of this idea, I felt from reading some of the articles, that, they were compelled to do this to be on reality television and appear rich, and Erica was like driving it. And I don't think that was necessarily the case, because subsequent investigations have shown Tom was doing this way before Erica came along and was, living this high-flying lifestyle. So I don't think it was like, oh, we need to start buying private jets and living large to be on the Housewives, like someone like Teresa Giudice was doing. So I think that because of the reality TV-ness of it, she's getting a little bit of a bad rap.
Yeah. And we should note that I'm sure he denies all allegations and he has not been criminally charged yet. And these are all just this is all speculation so far.
Right, but and I will say, but girl, ...
That is you saying that and not me. So speaking of shady, let's talk about let's go back to talking about Andy Cohen again, because I do want to ask this. We live in this moment of what many people call cancel culture. If anyone should be canceled, it seems like Andy Cohen should be canceled. Honestly, how does he get away and Bravo get away with having literally segregated TV shows? I mean, they couldn't find a black woman in New York or Beverly Hills. I mean, and they can't find a white woman in Potomac or Atlanta. Like, why are these shows segregated?
I don't feel as bad about having casts of all black women in Potomac or Atlanta, just because most of the representations we see in media are white people and white women. And I think that it's good to have these instances of black women interacting with each other in what is like a safe black space, which is something we don't see often, particularly among women of a certain age. And I think that has its own benefit. And I think that there are a lot of black communities like that. I feel a little less like that with the white shows. And yeah, we definitely, and we've seen that. So when I was doing research for the book, I was working on this for about 2 years before the book was finished, and it took another like 6 months to come out. So it was like 2.5 years. But so when I was talking to casting directors and such, it was before the COVID, before Black Lives Matter resurgence. And they were saying like, we tried to get people of color on and Bravo's not interested. And so we've seen now their tune has really changed and they're trying to diversify the cast. And I think that is good. And I hope that they continue to do that. But what's also hard is that, they're looking for people who have organic connections to the women already on the show. And we saw Ramona Singer's birthday party with 60 of her closest friends, and they all look exactly like Barbara Walters. So it's not like Ramona's going to be recommending people of color to be on the show. Right. So, and I think they've done a good job. And we've seen people like Ebony come on Real Housewives of New York and explain like, here's why what you say hits differently to me. Garcelle and Kyle had the same conversation on Beverly Hills. I also loved when Crystal said to Sutton on Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, don't say that I don't see color. Like, here's how that is wrong and how that is outdated. And I think that, we're seeing these conversations that are happening in houses and amongst groups of friends all over the country reflected in Housewives. And I think that's great. But I also think that Bravo and the companies that make these shows really need to protect the women of color they are putting on these shows, particularly like we saw the situation with Tiffany Moon in Real Housewives of Dallas, where she comes on the show and they're sort of attacking her with all these aggressions, micro and macro. And then one of the cast members' husbands is on social media saying that she's a racist because she's anti-racist. And and then Bravo finally had to issue a statement, but it wasn't really that supportive. And so, they're getting this barrier from cancellation by integrating these casts, but then aren't really helping the women of color that are giving them this barrier. And I think that's a pretty shitty deal for these women. Yeah, but there are also instances where I talked to a lot of intellectuals and academics who study the Housewives for the book. And there's the famous instance of Kenya and Portia getting in a fist fight at a Real Housewives of Atlanta reunion. And these people were talking about how Andy was really misreading the situation. And he's a white man amongst black women, and they're about to get in a fight. And he's like laughing and nodding along and like, this is camp and this is amazing. And he doesn't notice that it's about to go, that he's kind of egging this on and it's about to go over the cliff and there's about to be an assault. Right. And so, I think that we could stand to have somebody who is a little bit more maybe integrated into some of these communities being a bit of the figurehead for different cities of the franchise. Was that a good and thorough answer to your question?
Yeah, I mean, I think the point Yeah, I mean, I think you make good points about, especially about the Atlanta show being all Black, and there not being forums like that for, as you said, women of a certain age. And I think it's worth noting that that is the highest rated of the shows. So
Yes.
I think that's important to point out. But Andy Cohen has gotten, and Bravo got away with that for years and years. It was only this past year that anything really changed. And I think I've seen Ebony on New York, and I think she's been awesome. Like when I think Ramona said something like, referred to her like staff as the help, and she immediately like said, did she just say the help? And
right. And then she explains like, my grandmother was a domestic worker, and here's why you say that like affects me, and that's fucked up.
So that's why that's why it's important to have those different perspectives on these shows. So I think it's working. I think what they've done is good, but I think it's just like way overdue.
Well, and we even saw with Stassi Schroeder and Kristen Doty from Vanderpump Rules got fired for essentially weaponizing the police against the only Black cast member ever on Vanderpump Rules, and they got fired for that. And then shortly after that, Andy and Lisa were out there. It seemed like paving the way for them to return, and Andy saying like, that was just a decision for the moment, and I don't know that that was the right decision. And Lisa saying like, I don't think Stassi's a racist, and maybe she should come back. And so even they're already starting to like kind of backtrack on some of these things. And so but I agree with you. I can't believe Bravo has gotten away with what they've been doing for as long as they've been doing. And I think that from what I heard, there was a bit of a scramble to find women of color to put, especially on Real Housewives of New York, and a lot of women of color they approached didn't want to do it because why do you want to be the person who has to teach Ramona Singer not to be a racist?
Right.
It's a thankless job.
Yeah, that is not a job anybody would want.
No.
The other thing where the other area where I feel like Andy and Bravo have gotten away with a lot and are reckless is, there's a line somewhere between, colorful characters and stirring the pot, and like you mentioned, like Kenya and Portia getting into a fist fight, but like Taylor Armstrong in Beverly Hills, her husband allegedly was physically abusive. He wound up taking his own life, and all of that played out on that show, and then what's currently going on with Sonia feels exploitative. It feels like it's too much. I mean, she's having these breakdowns in public, and it feels more than, it's not like she's just had too much champagne. Like it really seems like there's something wrong. Like she's having some mental health challenges. And so at what point, if I had an employee who was behaving that way, I would, I'd have to do something. But they seem to just sort of milk these women and their problems for ratings. And at what point does that cross the line into exploitation?
That's a very good question. I think we saw this with Kim Richards on Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, where she was obviously struggling with addiction issues, and at some point they had to say like, girl, you can't be on the show, this is not good for you. And I feel that way about kids. Like, I don't want to see any of the kids especially the young kids on the show. Right. Like, I feel like we saw in the last season of Real Housewives of New Jersey, like Melissa Gorga having a Birds and the Bees talk with her daughter who clearly didn't want to be there. And like, she is not getting paid. She is not consented to be on the show. Her mother's consenting for her and then putting her in the situation that may or may not come back to haunt her. Or you look at in a more benign way, Gia Giudice's song going viral on TikTok, 10 years after she wrote it as like a 10-year-old, it's like, and their parents are gaining from this and they're not. And I don't like that. But I think that I would like to see them taking more responsibility, especially like I said, especially towards some of the women of color who are taking a beating from their castmates and fans and their castmates' families. I would also like to see them say, hey, Sonia, like, we need to get you help, or you need to address this if you want to come back next season, or what have you. But I also think that the system in general is exploitative in the favor of Bravo, in that they're hiring these women to do the show. Obviously, they're getting paid, they're getting a platform, they can start businesses, whatever. But Bravo, you know, I like to use the example of Dorinda Medley, where they're selling shirts that say the Berserk shirts. They're saying shirts that say clip, clip, clip. They're saying shirts that say I cooked, I cleaned, I made it nice. Like things that just came out of Dorinda's mouth that Bravo owns and is profiting off of. And they use Dorinda. They give her a lot of fame. They, you know, and then they just take it away. And now she's left with nothing, and it's harder for her to make money now that she's off the platform, but she is recognizable. And I think that I talked to a lot of women about what happens after the show, and it's very difficult for them, and they go through a mourning period. And so it's like Bravo is profiting way more off of these women than the women are profiting off of it. And they just kind of say, you're in, you're out, at their discretion. And I think that it's almost like a labor issue. Like I wish the Housewives would unionize, and and even, you know, all the people, the producers, the editors, everybody except for the executives of Bravo and the executives of the production company are all freelancers. And it's like, and if Bravo is sick of you, they're just like, peace out. And you know, I think that it's a very exploitative system in for capitalism. And I think the same is true of Andy Cohen, also a freelancer. And if he becomes too costly to Bravo, they'll cut him off too. And
is he not an employee of Bravo?
No, he gets paid to do the reunions and paid to do Watch What Happens Live, just like talent. He does not work at Bravo.
But does he have hello?
That's my husband, Christian. Also a Housewives fan.
But is he certainly presents himself as like, you know, he does the hiring and firing. Is that not true of the Housewives?
So Bravo does the hiring and firing of the Housewives outside of the deals they have with the talent come from Bravo, not from the production companies that make the shows. And each show is made by a different company, though some of the production companies make multiple shows. But Andy Cohen, people like to think he's in charge of hiring and firing, but he is one of the voices in the room when it comes to hiring and firing as a executive producer. But the head of the network and the head of production at Bravo are the people calling the shots. And so Andy's a voice in the room, but he is not the voice in the room, and he's not saying you're out, you're in. And in some instances, like he didn't want to hire Tinsley Mortimer and had to be talked into it. And, you know, she ended up being a housewife for several seasons. So he's not always right about these decisions. And I think sometimes, you know, we see that there are housewives that he doesn't really like Jennifer Aiden on Real Housewives of New Jersey. He seems to not be able to stand, but she's back for another season. So yeah, and I think that that's a big misconception about Andy, is that he is this kind of all-knowing Svengali, and that's not really the case at all. He's just one of a number of decision makers.
Okay, yeah, that was an interesting takeaway.
Yeah, but I think that he and Bravo have made himself the figurehead of this thing, and so I think he gets a lot of the credit and takes a lot of the flack when in some cases it is both of those things are misplaced.
Okay, that's a good point. So I want you to give your like elevator speech about why these shows are not destroying the country, because you talk about it in the book, and I think it was it Gloria Steinem who said that they're a minstrel show for women or something. Yeah.
Yes.
So why are these shows not destroying the country?
I think that the shows are destroying the country, in that I think it's good for representation, in that nowhere else on television are you going to see women of a certain age interacting with each other and going through real life struggles, whether it's divorce, addiction, launching a business, getting fired, dealing with their kids, you know, all the things that we all deal with now, like race relation issues, all the things that we all deal with, and we're seeing it through the lives of these women. And I think that that's really good. And I think there's a point in the book where it talks about how, yes, there will often be scenes that are where we think that they're setting feminism back. But there are also other scenes where it's showing empowered women doing their own businesses, working out of the home, really being go-getters. And yeah, I think that there's a lot to gain from these women. And even if it's like, don't behave like them, like a sort of a, like negative instruction of like, oh, don't be like that. So yeah, I don't think that, well, and I always say there have been so many things that are destroying the country, whether it was like gangsta rap music, whether it was Paris Hilton. I mean, think about all the things we were told are destroying television itself. And the country is still mostly good. You know, civilization is still standing. So I don't think if any of those things did it in, that the Housewives are going to do it. And also, I always like to point out that being on the Real Housewives never gave anyone possibly lethal concussion disorder like American football does. And we don't think about whether or not American football is destroying the country. And in fact, we like praise it. And I think that if you want to be into football, go ahead and be into football. And I'm not going to talk shit about it. If I want to be in the Housewives, let me be in the Housewives and not talk shit about it. Okay.
That was well put. We have a gay football player now too.
I mean, thank God. Hot too. He kind of looks like you, actually. He looks like a young Kevin Naff a little.
He went to Penn State too.
He did.
Yeah.
Are you two? Is he your son?
He is not. So we're kind of coming toward the end of our hour. Let's talk about the future, because every year these shows come out and I think, my God, they're trotting them out again. Like, how is Ramona and Sonia and whatever, like, it's the same people, like how many 13 years they've been on. But then in your book, you talk about, you know, there are soap operas that lasted 50 years. So, and I kind of agree with that. I think these shows could go on bloody forever.
Absolutely. And I think that, you know, the ratings are definitely going down, but they're on pace with the erosion of cable viewership across the board. So I don't think it's like the Housewives are losing viewers. I think it's just people are finding new ways to watch the Housewives, whether that's online or, you know, streaming services, what have you. And I don't, it's not in the zeitgeist like it was when it first started. I don't think it's ever going to be, just because it's not new and fresh anymore, but the fan base is bigger than you think it is. They're very ardent and they'll be with it to the end. They're like soap opera fans. And, you know, Andy always said when the ratings go down, we're just going to put a bunch of them on an island and film it. And so that is coming to Peacock in the fall. So I'm a little bit worried, but they launched a Vanderpump Dogs show. They're launching Real Housewives of Miami on Peacock. You know, they're still keeping these shows going. And so they wouldn't be launching new versions of them if it didn't make sense. But I think that I think we are seeing some struggles with the older of the shows, particularly Real Housewives of New York this current season and Real Housewives of Orange County. And like it seemed, and I think Atlanta, they seem like coworkers. The organic connections don't seem there. The dynamics aren't shifting. It's like Portia and Kenya still hate each other, and that's never going to change. So I think that we need to see some freshening up and a way to kind of reboot these shows.
I think your husband just walked by in his underwear.
He 100% did, and he was warned not to. But you're all welcome for the free show.
We're live, Christian.
Exactly, girl. We got 6 minutes left. You couldn't stay in your room for 6 more minutes.
Now you mentioned the OC going downhill. They just fixed it by bringing Heather Dubrow back, right?
We'll see if that's what the OC needs. I would like to see some. Christian, you're on the internet. I feel like I'm like on BBC with that little girl who was like coming up behind them.
Right.
We'll see what happens with OC. I would like to see a little bit more diversity there. There he goes again. And yeah, I'm curious to see how Heather Dubrow is going to fit in with Emily and Gina and Shannon Bedore, who she famously feuded with. So
Right. Okay. Let's wrap this up and just kind of give me like, where are you now with the book? How's it been received? Have you heard from Bravo? Have you heard from the lawyers? Have you heard from Andy? Where does it go from here?
So the book is a New York Times bestseller, so yay. And so that's good. It seems to be doing very well. So I'm excited about that. I know I live in London, and so I wanted the book to be available to buy for my friends and fans here. And there's now like a backlog in the UK to like get it because they underestimated the demand of Housewives fans here. And when the book became a bestseller, my agent said, like, I want to email every one of the editors who said, I don't think people want to read a whole book about the Housewives, and show them that it's a New York Times bestseller. And I think that that's true. We're always underestimated as Housewives fans. And I knew we could do it, guys. So thank you. I did hear from Bravo. I write in the book about how I snuck into BravoCon, their like fan convention. And I wrote about it for the book because they had told my editor, at Vulture, where I've been writing about Housewives and doing the recaps for many years, that I wasn't welcome, so I couldn't get a press pass. So I just bought tickets and showed up and wrote about it in the book. And then right before the book came out, they must have gotten an advance copy somehow. And so they announced the new BravoCon, and the head of PR at Bravo sent me an email with the press release and said, at least you won't have to sneak in this year. So I don't know if that was like, welcome back or what, but I had been working on a number of articles for, like, I was doing an article for the New York Times about how reality shows were dealing with reunions during COVID, at like the very start of the pandemic. And I told my editor, hey, I have this tricky relationship with Bravo. Would you call them and see what's up? And so she called Bravo, and they were like, yeah, if Brian's writing the story, we're not going to participate. So I just wrote it without them. And so another publication that, you know, it's like a big mainstream magazine wanted me to do something about the Housewives, but they wanted Bravo to participate, and they were supposed to get in touch with Bravo to see if they would allow me to do it. Because Bravo was saying, oh, he can't do these interviews because he's going to use that information for the book. But now that the book is out, I can't do that. So I'm waiting to see whether or not the fatwa against me has been lifted. We'll see, but I haven't been sued, so that's good. I haven't other than that email, I haven't heard from Bravo or Andy or any of the Housewives, though Bronwyn Wyndham Burke, our only queer full-time housewife, did follow me on Instagram the other day, so
she was fired, wasn't she?
She sure was.
Yeah.
So maybe she's just looking for more attention. Who can say? But Jill Zarin posted about the book because it's dedicated to her. So yeah, it seems like it's having its fans. I haven't been stupid enough to read the like Amazon reviews, so because I don't want to know. But yeah, so I'm excited about it, and you know, I'm still writing Housewives recaps. Vulture and I just launched a Real Housewives newsletter that comes out every 2 weeks. So I'm still in deep in housewifery.
In deep. I think your next project should be a joint venture with Aviva Drescher.
Well, I've been saying if I do another book like this, it's going to be about Drag Race. So,
oh yeah,
get ready, gays, for my Drag Race book. But we'll see what happens. How's the Washington Blade doing without me? How have you survived so many years without me?
And can you believe I'm still here?
Girl, no, honestly, I can't.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, you know, obviously last year was complicated and tricky, but we survived, and we pivoted to a lot of these virtual events and things. But the city's back, everything's reopened, and we're, you know, I think by fall it'll be back to normal. So it's all good.
I'm so jealous. We're still restricted here in the beautiful United Kingdom. Yeah. And I'm seeing like New York Pride and DC Pride all over my Instagram. And I'm like, you queens, I am so mad at you.
You should come back.
Oh, I should. I had a dream recently that I was like back working for you.
Oh.
And you didn't pay me. So where's my check, Kevin Nash?
You should be paying me. You're the one selling all these books out here.
Hello, girl.
Well, I'm going to show the book one more time. There it is. Can you see it?
The Housewives. You can buy it at thehousewivesbook.com or anywhere the books are sold.
And I highly recommend it. It's a very good read, but I would start with the acknowledgement section because that's where my name is.
Yeah, especially near the end where it says Kevin Neff.
Right. Well, thank you, Brian. We love you. We miss you. Congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
And let me know when you're back in the States.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.